Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. And we are going to dig into Battle Angel Alita. And if you haven't watched my introductory video to this already, I will link it down below. But this is part of a series I want to do analyzing this story and why I think it's so great. Now, as I said in my introductory video, I am occasionally going to compare this story, Kishiro's story, to the version presented by Rodriguez and Cameron in their Alita Battle Angel in 2019, I want to say. And I'm going to discuss a little bit why I think they did that story, or this story rather, such a disservice in the way they modified it for screen, and really in the way they discarded the original themes and characters of the story for their own ends. But that's not the primary purpose of this series. My primary purpose is to appreciate a very well-told story and explain why I think it is so thematically rich. But we are in the early stages of the story, and honestly, only the first 2 volumes, I think, will tie directly back to the story that was told in the Alita movie. So really, we're not going to discuss those comparisons for a very long time. But we are going to be doing a fair amount of that in this video, so just a heads up. If you don't want any spoilers for that movie or for the manga, this is really not going to be a video series for you. This is more of an analysis, breaking down what I think is done in the story here in my hand and in the story as it was shown on the screen. If you are curious about any of the terms or names I use in this, I do explain those all in the first video as well. So there could be a few discrepancies to the movie, just because I read this translation the most, and a lot of the names I know were changed for this translation. I might use them accidentally, but for the most part, I'm going to try and use Kishiro's original terminology, which is one of the things that they maintained in the movie, and one of the things that I do respect about the movie adaptation. Now, we're just looking at the first 3 chapters of Volume 1 here, and we are going to move a little bit faster than that going forward, but really I wanted to focus just on these chapters so we could really dig into the characters as they're introduced and discuss a little bit of their thematic through lines over the course of the story, because they are very different in this version of the story as compared to Cameron and Rodriguez's version. And of course, if you're going to be going on this whole ride with me and you've never seen either version of the story, well, that's something you'll need to be on the lookout for as well. And we are introduced first and foremost to Scrap Iron City as a place, specifically the scrapyard portion. This first page is all about the world and not really about the people in it. And I think that is something that Cameron and Rodriguez really captured in their opening scenes. In fact, pretty much everything that we're going to discuss in these 3 chapters was very well carried over into the movie. I was very pleased with the movie for about the first 40 minutes, maybe 50 minutes of the runtime, because they did do a good job, I think, of capturing a lot of the essence, especially of the world. But there were some off points. We'll start talking about those more next time we discuss this manga. But right now, a lot of what we get here is pitch perfect. We get Alita introduced. We get Ido introduced. We see Ido working on putting Alita back together. She starts off as just a head, and in the movie, she kind of jumps straight from being a head basically to being a fully assembled cyborg. But in the manga, we kind of see her being assembled piece by piece. And that's very important because in this chapter, one of the first characters being established is not Alita, it's Ido. And Ido is being established first because he embodies the thematic through line of the story. Ido is a character whose impulses and whose self-control are in balance. Ido can control himself, but he can also indulge his impulses, what some might consider his instincts or his darker side, and he can do it in ways that are beneficial to him and the people around him. But we have to establish this at first. So we are first seeing Ido helping. We are seeing him as a healer. Most people call him Dr. Ido. But the first hint that we get that he is not everything that he seems is only 8 pages into the story. When we see him promising that he will repair Alita, he has this look on his face. That expression is a remarkably stern, sharp, hard expression for a man who is a healer. And immediately following that, we see a woman on the street murdered. And she has a set of highly decorated robotic arms. Immediately following that, we see Alita sporting those arms. And there's a little bit of this in the initial, the early parts of Cameron's movie. But instead of setting up the possibility that Ido is taking pieces off of cyborgs that he's murdered, Cameron immediately tells us right away that Alita's body was intended for Ido's daughter. Now, in this story, Ido has no wife or daughter. The wife was an addition for the OVA, and the daughter was an addition. I haven't seen the OVA, so I presume the daughter was an addition for the movie. I've never heard her mentioned anywhere before, although I have occasionally heard Ido's wife mentioned in other contexts. Either way, in Kishiro's original story, Ido was single and had no kids, at least as far as we know. We'll talk more about that when we get further into the story. But right now, what you really need to know is that Ido is going out at night, dressed up like he's some kind of weird stalker guy. And that is, of course, Ido's dark side. These are his savage impulses that we are starting to see hints of. And while he is rebuilding Alita, she's getting arms and legs. They're very fancy and decorative, in line with Alita's very beautiful face and eyes. We are not sure where these are coming from. Now, Alita is also aware of these strange goings-on. In fact, at one point, she's told by passerbys on the street that she should be careful when she goes out at night, because there's a serial killer stalking good-looking women with cyborg body parts. And she starts to get worried that Ido is going out and murdering people. That's a bit of a jump, you might think, but the Scrapyard and Scrap Iron City are pretty savage places, so it's not surprising that she might go there after a little while, especially because Ido is a doctor. People come in there injured all the time. It's not like Alita is his only patient, and she's probably seen a lot of injured people coming off the street that have had violence done to them. So maybe it's not surprising that she winds up in this place. Anyway, we see Ido doing his thing at night. He puts together this really awesome, sweet rocket hammer, which is, that is something that is part of his original character design, and he is stalking this woman on the street. Long story short, the woman is an insane mutant who is hunting good-looking women, and in fact, Ido is a bounty hunter who is after the price on her head. Again, this was in the movie as well, but we're told that Ido does this more to indulge his lust for battle. Essentially, Ido does this because he's an adrenaline junkie. He likes the rush of hunting something down and killing it. And he knows that he can't be a good person if he does that outside of the context of hunting criminals. So that's what he does. And that baseline metric of Ido having these savage impulses and channeling them to the betterment of the community, while also being a very ordered and structured and even scientific person, is the core of Alita Battle Angel. Now, it's going to unfold in a lot of strange ways and go a lot of different places, but that is the essence. That is the core lesson that Kishiro is talking about here. You can channel your dark impulses into ways that do good for the people around you, and you can build up orders and structures in your life that also help you do good for the people around you. Neither one of these things, neither your instinctive reactions nor your ordered mindset, are bad if they are done deliberately and intentionally and in balance with each other. All the rest of this story is about people who either cannot control their impulses or who have allowed order to overtake them entirely, so they no longer have any sense of what's around them at all. So, Chapter 2 introduces us to two major conflicts. The first is between Ido and Alita. Alita wants to become a warrior just like Ido is. She took out, or at least helped take out, the serial killer using the Panzerkunst, of course, her signature martial art. as we, again, they did a really good job setting that up in the movie. There is, I don't remember if this particular serial killer was in the film. I think she was introduced as a minion to Griuska, however you say that name. I don't remember. It's been quite some time since I've seen the film. In this story, she stands alone from Makaku, who is the equivalent to Griuska in this story. I'm not sure why they changed his name for the movie, but it's what they did, so we'll let it be. In fairness, Griuska and Makaku are not anywhere similar, either character-wise or largely in the role they serve in the story, so I can kind of understand changing his name. That said, Griuska does have the appearance of Makaku, many of his lines, and his signature weapon, so I would have left the name unchanged, but I didn't write it. You know, adaptation, we can argue about that till the cows come home. It's not really the point of what we're talking about here. So, Ido doesn't want Alita to become a hunter-warrior. He thinks it's a very grim job, it's a very dirty job, and it's not one suited for her. Alita wants to do something for Ido, and she knows she can help him earn money. She can pay for her own repairs and upkeep. This is very important to her, and over the course of this chapter, eventually Ido relents and allows her to be a hunter-warrior. At the same time, we have these two guys going around, and they're kind of beating up people, and we learn that the big guy, which is Makaku, the equivalent to Griuska in the story, is an endorphin junkie. He likes to take endorphins as a kind of painkiller, and he prefers to get them fresh from living brains, because Kishiro's story is kind of over the top in its violence to an almost slapstick extent. So we see him going around eating people's brains, and it's kind of gross and kind of silly at the same time. Makaku, in many ways, begins as a villain that's hard to take seriously. But he is a very serious character, and an important one. We see Ido hunting Makaku and his minions. He takes out one of his minions. I can't show you a lot of that because this is, Kishiro does not shy away from violence very much, and he's okay with showing it in kind of gory detail. Probably this is not over-the-top slaughter porn. It's not a Saw movie, but it's probably at least on the Saving Private Ryan level, I'd say, in terms of how graphic the violence is. Probably a little bit worse, just because it can be so cartoony and over-exaggerated when you're not limited by practical effects. But Alita comes across Makaku and fights him. And while she manages to knock one of his arms off, he has a body built for combat, and she has a body built to look nice. So eventually he manages to smash her in half. Again, this is something we see in the movie. We see that a body that is built for its appearance and for being pleasing to the eye will not allow Alita to do the things that she wants to do with her life. We do have the really hardcore moment where she fights Makaku with a single arm. That's pretty cool. But eventually, Ido has to come in and save Alita, and he busts up parts of Makaku's body, and it is eventually revealed, of course, that Makaku is actually just this kind of maggoty snake thing. Very interesting and grotesque a design that goes in line with the kind of character Makaku is. We get some interesting pseudo-philosophical talk. Makaku becomes very talkative as soon as his head is removed from his body. He comments on how his body is, his mindset is partially influenced by his body. There's some interesting notes there that will come back later. We're going to see in a little while how Makaku's mind has influenced his body as well. But ultimately, Ido is going to have to repair Alita, and he decides she has to have a warrior's body so she can do what she wants to do. All in all, this is a pretty good introduction and setup for our characters. We have Ido as the thematic endpoint of the story. He is a character in balance. Alita represents one extreme of the two poles that Ido balances. She is extremely innocent. She's a little naive. She's a very orderly character in many ways. She has clear standards. She has clear goals. They are rather simplistic because she is quite childlike, but she has standards and goals. Makaku, on the other hand, is entirely chaotic. He's entirely driven by his impulse to consume endorphins to kill the pain he feels. And these two characters are about to collide in a very big way, bigger than they have already collided, in fact, because these two characters are going to have to work out and balance out the order and the chaos that each embodies. And that is the kind of conflict we are going to see time and time again in this story. But what's really interesting about it is that Alita will not always be on the same side of that story. There are times when she will be order, and there are times when she will be chaos. And eventually, of course, we are going to see her arrive at the place where Ido is, where her impulses and her structured thoughts are in balance and in harmony, and she can use each one as the situation calls for. Now, what is important about this story, in contrast to the story that we see in Rodriguez and Cameron's film, is that the Sky City, Zalem, or as it is translated here, Typharis, is the place of order, and Scrap Iron City is the place of chaos. They are literally at opposite ends of a pole. They represent the extremes of this dichotomy. In Kishiro's story, they need to be brought into balance, and Alita will take part in that process. In Cameron's story, order must be subsumed by chaos, as at least assuming the symbology here plays through. Now, I'm not sure that Cameron intended that symbology to be part of the script he wrote. It certainly doesn't seem like Rodriguez intended it to be there. But when you have a very powerful overlord type civilization, as Zalem was presented in the Alita film, they naturally fill the extreme of order. So I'm going to assign Zalem, at the very least, the position of absolute order in that film as well. And we're going to see very quickly why that puts it at odds with this story, but not right this instant. First, we have to sort out the smaller matters. We have to sort out Alita versus Makaku, or Alita versus Griuska in the film. So next time, we'll talk more about how that's the same, how it deviated, and why I think Kishiro did such a great job with it. But until then, you can let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.